Main guitar is 2 amps, both going out of Emperor 6x12 cabinets. My favorite cabinet, which I think is the one with the JMP, I think, has some Eminence Texas Heat speakers in the positions that I mic'd. There's a whole bunch of different speakers in it, but those are the ones I mic'd. And the other cabinet, which is the Sparrow Sun and the V4, that is also an Emperor 6x12 with Eminence Swamp Things in the mic'd position. I would say that Texas Heat is probably the speaker that I record the most and my favorite. And this Marshall JMP, not too long before this recording session, I had my buddy Scott over at S&K Pedals. He's a good amp tech. He used to work for Dennis Kager, who's a legend who just passed away. He set it up with a set of Philips 6CA7 like mil-spec old tubes that I found, and really like turned into my favorite guitar amp. So I hadn't been using Marshalls for a while, but I've been back pretty heavy on Marshall for a while now, and I really love it. And so yeah, so I love this JMP, and I can't remember what I used for a guitar on this song, but it probably was my first act with James Hetfield EMG model, which that first act just plays like butter, and if you're not a fan of EMGs, like, I don't know, the James Hetfield set might change your mind. It's got way more like low mid push and like meanness. It's not like, as organic or as subby as a lot of passive pickups are, but it's definitely less like clinical and all the things that people complain about EMGs being. But it's still like, if you like EMGs, it still has all the things you like. I don't know. It's a pickup that has everything for me. I haven't been using that live lately. I've been using the Lawler DBs, which I also really love. They're very deep but also clear pickup. I did not have those yet on the making of this record, so I didn't have a chance to use them. Some songs do have Lawler Imperials on them, as well as some songs have some bare knuckle pickups too. But I'm pretty sure this guitar was the first act Sheena with EMG James Hetfield bridge pickup. So anyway, let's check out the JMP. All right, so guitar is a mid-range instrument, and Marshalls are definitely good at mid-range, especially when they're EL34 equipped. And 6AS7 is the American version of an EL34, so it's basically an EL34. So sounds like a Marshall. It's not like it's not a modern full frequency sound, but I'm trying to be, laser beam that cuts through the middle and not something that occupies the whole frequency space. There's no channel EQ on this thing. Let's see, what's this? Why do you even have that there? I don't know why that's... No automation. Okay, so then the other amp I use is this amp called the Sparrow Sun, which is not a lot of them out there. I really like it. It's a custom amp made by a guitar shop in Belarus called Sparrow Sun Guitar Shop, and the owner's a fan and a friend, and he sent me one to check out, and I really like it. So I use that thing. Let's hear it. I'm trying to figure out if I actually use this EQ or if it was bypassed for a reason. We'll find out. Yeah, I definitely use this. There's some like weird, like, a lot of guitars have that like 11K or somewhere up around there sizzle to them that needs to go away, and a lot of people will address that just by low passing their guitars. I like the sound of air around things, and it's maybe like I like it to a fault, but I prefer to do a notch filter rather than a low pass or even like a high shelf. That lets me just address what I perceive as the problem frequency and leave the other frequencies alone. So combining the JMP and the Sparrow, we get this. All right, so a very mid-forward tone, and I don't know, close mic, it feels like you're right there in front of the amp. Add some room mic just for some width. Solo the room mic for a sec. If I remember correctly, the room mics were actually just the same mics as the drum wide, the drum room wide mics, which are the TC30Ks on the wall. I probably just did it out of convenience because they were already mounted there, but I may have, sometimes I do this, sometimes I don't, I may have actually left the whole rig patched as the way, with the same settings and everything that I did on the drums. So now there's a drum room mic that's still set up and the guitar is being recorded, or the ambient guitar is being recorded in the same setup as the drums. So now they're really in the same acoustic space with the same settings, which I think helps sort of add some cohesiveness to the mix. Puts, even if it's just academic, in my mind it puts guitars and drums in the same acoustic space. So here, that whole thing again. Then I've got Guitar Room Alt, this is just sort of like, I think like a haphazardly placed dynamic mic on the other side of the room, which sort of simulates what a drum bleed would sound like. So if you have like a mic on the drum set and the guitar amps on the other side of the room, like there's going to be some bleed in the drum mics from the guitar. So this sort of simulates that. And also it's panned opposite the close mics of the guitar. So it just gives me a little bit of stereo width, and like in those sections of the song where one guitar is playing by itself, it's not fully on one, just coming out of one speaker. So, those room mics are there, but they're just really just adding a little bit of air. They're not doing a whole lot. Guitar 2 is no changes to the JMP sound. It should be exactly the same, just panned opposite. It's possible I use a different guitar and or a different pedal, but same amp. Let's see, we got a V4, which I probably need this EQ for. Probably should have notched that out. I did before, but I'm doing it now. So together, and the same exact room and alt room setup. So let's hear those together. So you'll notice that feedback section is edited, well, it looks like a punch-in or an edit. I did takes of this song in the live room in front of the amp. I just had like my laptop out there, screen sharing to run the transport, and I just did tracks, with I use extreme isolation headphones so I can kind of hear what's going on, and just do live tracks to get a cool feel out in the live room, and then. Yeah, it looks like I didn't like consolidate the Guitar 2, but I probably consolidated Guitar 1. Do tracks out there, put it on its own playlist, then go to another playlist and do tracks in the control room where I can sit between the controller monitors and actually get like a more precise performance for the sections that need feedback, and then just kind of comp between those two versions of the takes of the song, so I can get the wild where I need wild and get the precise where I need precise.
Someone had that exact question.
Yeah. People always ask me about feedback as if there's like some weird, crazy technique, but no, it's you turn an amp up loud and you stand in front of it. There's like nothing weird about it. I mean, there's definitely some tricks to it, but I think what you have to do when you're going for feedback is like just forget about the idea of what it's going to sound like in your head. Feedback just happens. It's very difficult to control. I mean, there's ways to control it, but it's very difficult to predict, and that's what's cool about it, and it's probably not going to sound the way you have it in your head. I will give people this advice about feedback is the harder you hit, the less you feedback, because the bigger the signal is coming out of the guitar, the longer it takes for feedback to overwhelm that. So like, especially if you want, like, if you have like a long chord with like singing feedback, if you go like, it's going to take a while for that volume to kind of like settle back in before the guitar can start to like resonate and bloom into feedback. But if you go gung, it'll very quickly go to feedback. So, stuff like that. This muting, you got to actually mute the guitar well if you want a squealing feedback. If you want a resonant feedback, you let the strings go. Resting the neck against the cabinet can give you resonant feedback. So I guess there are some tricks. Pick a pedal that's more conducive. Sometimes like the pedal, like the distortion pedal that gets used for the feedback is different than the distortion pedal that gets used for the rest of the thing. Or you might have a brighter setting on the pedal or more gain on the pedal to get more feedback. But it's pretty much just like stand in front of loud amps and you get feedback. All right, so then there's also some 6534 tracks, and I popped in here and there on this record with the 6534. I kind of like have shit talked a lot of high gain metal amps in my day, but this thing really impressed me. I think actually I have some problems with it right now, some parasitic oscillation, but I don't know, something about the EL34 version of that 6550 circuit, or the 6505 circuit that I like. There's just like this mid-forward thing. It's mean, but it's still like organic and present. And I use that just for supplemental tracks. There's no channel EQ on that. Oh yeah, thanks. Sure. There we go. I don't honestly remember what I used for a mic or a cabinet on this thing. Once I get to like ancillary guitars, I tend to simplify my setup where I'm not using as many mics because I'm trying to blast out ideas faster than I am trying to get like the ultimate tones. The tones on the other amps were, I don't even remember what I used, but like my favorite guitar mics are like Heil PR30s, AEA N22, obviously 57s of various varieties, 421s, 409s, 121s. That stuff was probably all in the mix on those things, and there were probably 2 mics on each of these amps that got bussed together on the way in. And then one trick that I do that wouldn't have been in this session is when there's no like sample alignment plugins or anything like that on these amps right here, but I may have done some of that on guitar. Let's actually look and see if these tracks are shifted around at all. They're not. So I guess I got it pretty good to begin with, or I could make it better by sampling a line like I did with the bass. But like a cool trick to that is like if you're reamping, you can make like a little edit of the DI to be like a super short, just a little blip. But if you're not, like I'll take like the bass guitar, for example, like I'll take a screwdriver and I'll like start recording and I'll just tap on the pickup. So I get like a very quick, sudden transient. And then I'll look at all the various bass tracks graphically, see where those things are lining up and see if there's any kind of like sample offset on those things. And I listen, of course, but like I'll use that as like my starting point of like, do I need to like move this thing ahead in time, backwards in time, and by how much, where do I want to start? And then I'll start with that position and start kind of scrolling around that general area to see if I can do anything to improve things by sliding things around in time. So it doesn't look like I had to do that on guitar.
Quick question for you about guitar and miking. So I'm sure that lots of people who are not very experienced are going to see this and want to add a bunch of mics. I'm just wondering if you subscribe to that whole idea of don't try 2 or 3 or 4 until you can get one sounding awesome. Like, do you agree with that or not?
As someone who tried for a lot before he realized that one sounds good, then yes, I do subscribe to that. I've never put it in those words, but yeah, I don't think you shouldn't be allowed to try more things, but keep on, we get a lot of track counts now available to us in DAWs, so keep that stuff on separate tracks. Like if you're experimenting, give yourself a fail-safe, one good mic position that is going to sound good. One good mic through a good mic preamp, is going to sound good, and then you can add other things to experiment, and just just try hard to fight the urge to use them all, because a lot of times, like, more focus, you'll get more focus from one source than you will from a lot of sources, and it's not like more mics does not equal more sound in a lot of cases. One of my philosophies with multi-miking is if I'm using very rarely use more than 2 mics on a cab these days. And if I am using 2 mics on a cab, I make sure I choose 2 very different sounding mics and put them in 2 very different sounding mic positions. So, like, if I have a bright mic, I'll choose mics and positions to even further spread them apart from each other, so they have less of a phase relationship. So, like, if I choose, like, say, a 57 and a Royer 121, like, I'll put the 57 sort of at the edge of the dust cap, right up on the cab in a very bright kind of position. It's a bright mic and it's in a bright mic position. And then the 121 will be at the edge of the cone, maybe like aimed along the path of the cone, or maybe it's aimed right into it. But that'll be a very dark position. And now I have bass and treble controls, which they do have a phase relationship, and you need to check for that stuff. But they're so different sounding from each other that they don't have as strong a phase relationship as if you put 257 side by side, for example. So now you get some bass and treble controls, and you can blend that stuff on the way in. You can commit that on the way in. I have a console that I do that with in the analog domain, but you can also assign those 2 mic preamps to 2 different aux inputs in Pro Tools, for example, if that's the DAW you're using, and then assign the output of those 2 aux inputs to 1 track, and now you've already made some decisions, and now you can move on to the next thing. Frees up system resources, and you've already made a decision, and you don't need to revisit that.